Welcome back to Tech Inspection, where we dive into a bunch of different topics all around drag racing, and we really want to focus on specific deep tech that you guys might not know about, you might be interested in. And every single week, we're going to check out a different subject from around the world of drag racing. And this week, we're checking out fuel injection, how far it's come in the last 5 to 10 years. And we're also going to be talking to some guys over at FuelTech and talk about FuelTech specifically, the different offerings they have for tuning systems, as well as tuners that use them, and guys from FuelTech. And joining me again is Brian Wagner. Hey, man, what's going on?
What's going on, Petty? Ready to talk some FuelTech?
Oh, I am so ready because there are so many good tuning, software options out on the market for drag racing. And I've messed with Holly, I've messed with FuelTech, I've messed with, a couple other ones. And FuelTech is definitely one of those ones you see a lot. It's a very good software. I want to talk to these guys and get the inside scoop on this because something I've been really interested in for a while. So I am very glad that we are talking about this. And also make sure viewers to stay tuned. We're going to do another one with Holly in a couple different episodes, later down the road. But today we're focusing specifically on FuelTech. So I really want to get your feedback, Wagner, on, the kind of things that you want to address in this show, maybe give a little bit of a hint of what direction and what kind of questions we're going to ask our guests today, and maybe just talk really quickly through our guests.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this is we're going to be able to kind of look at the progression of fuel injection in the drag racing setting over so many years and kind of what FuelTech's really exploded as part of that. And we're going to be able to look at, how the self-tuning side thing of works, the incorporating the data logging like they do, the different levels of ECUs that they have for different levels of cars, and just all these different things, spark control, ignition. It's really going to be kind of wild to tie it all together and bring that to the fans. And then we've got the murderer's row of guests. We got Anderson Dick, the guy at FuelTech. We got Jamie Miller, the godfather of the Red Hot Mafia tuning. And then we got Mark Micke, racer and tuner, Radial versus the World, Pro 275, been around a while. So we're going to get some really good perspectives from these guys about tuning and specifically what FuelTech brings to the table.
Great. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. But now that we've given you guys a little bit of an intro to the show, talked about what we're going to, specifically talk about and the guests we're going to have on, let's just work it right into the fun segment of the week. So I was searching, looking for some stuff. Last week we had an all-billet twin-turbo 3,000 horsepower C8 Corvette. That was hard to top. Wagner, you had your Volkswagen with the Coyote, which was wild. And this week I found something from the guys over at MBE. I was just surfing through the web, looking through the news feed, and MBE actually came out with these killer all-billet cylinder heads for small block Chevy and small block Ford. Now, these things have been designed specifically for maximum flow, maximum efficiency, and just a ton of horsepower and strength. So to give you guys a couple little specs on these, we'll show some pictures and give you guys a little bit of a visual. But basically, in the lowest flowing form, these heads flow 480 CFM on the intake, and up to 500 CFM, depending on how the valves are cut and depending on how they do stuff. That's insane for a small block, any small block Ford, small block Chevy cylinder head. And the fact that they have a 2.29-inch diameter intake valve. That is bigger than a lot of big block Chevy intake valves. So, Wagner, talk to me, man.
Small block. That's the only way to look at it. Just the technology and the flow that these cylinder head guys, what they come up with is just off the charts. And it kind of makes me think of, in the no time world, they have that small block nitrous class. And, how big is the small block and whatnot, and what can they cram into it? With those kind of flow numbers, that's insane. I mean, that's just, there's so much room for activities on what they're going to be able to do with those heads. It's going to be interesting how they use them. I mean, that's a pretty big blank canvas to play with.
Oh, it's huge. And they also can, change the chamber, change the way that they machine stuff, and the porting design on all of them, depending on your application. So whether you're nitrous or supercharged or turbocharged, what kind of power you're looking to make, like they can set up the heads for everything. And I think, once they go through testing, once they get them on some cars and, see how it all works out, they could be like a major staple in heads up racing across the nation. So I just wanted to give them some screen time. I saw that. It was really cool. Go onto their site, check them out. Really cool cylinder heads that look extremely nice. And, if you're looking for max ebb for small block Ford, small block Chevy, those are the ones to go with. Wagner, I don't know if you had anything or if that was just the fun segment for the week.
Let's go with that for the week because I know you proposed it. And I'm like, all right, that's fun because it's not often we get to see something like that kind of broken out new. And it's if I won lottery money, what would I buy? You just buy those, even if you're not going to put them on a car. You just put them in your man cave and be like, yeah, those are just some billet.
They'd just be they'd be right behind me right here, just like a small block Ford single and a small block Chevy single cylinder head.
Who needs a Tiger when you got gangster cylinder heads for some joy, right?
Right. I totally agree, dude. That is 100%, right on. So, all righty. Now that we've had our fun segment, I thought those cylinder heads were great. I'm looking forward to seeing them, testing them, and getting them out there. So now let's just dive right into the show. And it looks like we have Anderson Dick coming on next. Wagner, you want to give this guy a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of background on this guy?
Anderson is the guy, the head of FuelTech. Very, very smart person, very innovative with how he does things from Brazil. FuelTech's a Brazil-based company, and he really has an interesting forward-facing vision for the company. And I'm going to be running FuelTech on a soon-to-be-announced Dragzine project car, but just talking with him, you really get a feel on they're trying to put the racer first and get racer data on what they do. So they're a performance and racer driven company. So his ideas, he's always thinking that they say that they're doing one thing, but they've already got 4 more steps planned behind it. So it's going to be interesting to get his feedback on some of these questions we have up and just, learn more about what he thinks.
So just a little bit is about FuelTech. If you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, possibly, they are one of the main staples when it comes to all-out performance, whether it's twin turbo, centrifugal supercharger, big nights. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're really big in sport compacts. So I have a couple import guy friends that FuelTech FT 450, 550, even 600. They're running on these really, really fast imports. So they have a huge range of different cars they're going after, and they're also planning to expand. So let's talk to Anderson Dick. Hey, there he is. Perfect. I was running out of material. Anderson, what's going on, man?
Good, man. Working from home and keeping up with everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you guys for the invite.
Hey, we appreciate you coming on the show for sure. So if you want, let's talk about FuelTech just a little bit, your role there and how you've worked with the company, over the last few years and kind of what your guys' main goal is.
Cool. Yeah, so you can probably notice by my accent, I'm Brazilian. So I'm actually living in the US for almost 4 years now. I moved up here after being flying so frequently to US, and our main business is already US. So I actually founded a company 18 years ago in Brazil. It seems like yesterday, but we just get old and been learning every day and doing what we love. So it's a very nice challenge. My position pretty much is like I'm the CEO, but mainly I'm the head of the development and R&D, as well the strategies. So I'm grateful to have a great team, a lot of people that are really passionate about what we do. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we're growing and strongly succeeding lately.
And kind of going off of that, Anderson, seeing kind of how you guys have grown and whatnot, let's talk about what FuelTech brings to the drag racing ECU world, because you guys got everything from like mild to hot and spicy with your ECUs. What have you guys put into the development to make these work so well for drag racing?
I think first, I consider FuelTech probably one of the few or maybe the only drag racing focused ECUs in the market. So I think we really were born on a drag racing environment, and we really deepest invested on this market. And obviously, because first it starts with a passion. I mean, we're truly passionate about drag racing, and honestly, it may not be the smartest decision a few years ago, because not all the other ECU manufacturers were focusing on other markets that may be even bigger. But I think we did some good choices and some intelligent decisions about how well we could focus on drag racing and develop specific features on our ECUs, and always keeping the ECUs like with no custom firmware, so open software, so everybody can have access which for every feature. So I think this kind of strategy been very successful, because we were trying a little different from other ECU on a way of actually, if one of our friends or tuners or clients help us designing a new feature, we first design it for free, so we don't charge for custom firmwares. And second, we share to every client, so it becomes a public free update for everyone. So this is how we've been growing a lot, because every new update, I could name a bunch of very important people that really helped to test and develop and come up with those features. But that benefits like thousands of people when it comes online. So I think the timing or the times of the cars have been dropping a lot in the last few years, and part of that is definitely because the technology is becoming more available and widely available for every racer.
I definitely think that's one thing that's coming through is just the advancements in general and how many different racers are just expanding and making things faster and faster and finding new ways to do stuff. And I think that FuelTech, you guys have been doing a great job with that for sure. On kind of along that same subject, let's talk about FT Spark and also FT coils and how that's something I believe it's somewhat new. You might have to school me a little bit on it, but talk to me about how that has changed and what you guys use that for and how it's a big advantage.
Yeah, that's actually for sure one of the biggest advance in the last few years. Um, Drag racing market been using magnetos for so many decades, and they done a great job increasing the level of power, especially on methanol feed cars and turbo cars, and especially blown cars. So we figured that nobody was really investing on extreme high power ignition system for individual coils, because even the mag having like a very powerful output, it still depends on the self-generated and the distributor. So it was really demanding to have a newer technology on that part. So what we actually thought was, man, let's do just the strongest ignition even possible nowadays, because I can say like 10 years ago, or maybe even less, like 7 years ago, there was not even the technology available to do this kind of CDIs we're doing now. And honestly, being a small company and like almost like a family business, I'm so proud to see that the market is approving and following us, because now we see more products like having that kind of technology. And we had some already before, but it wasn't really popular on the really high level drag racing. So now it's almost like a new a mandatory product to run a really high horsepower engine. I can also tell, like, we designed it the best we could, but we're not even sure if that will be really helpful as we expect it to be. The good news is actually, even using our hub dyno, which has been very busy for the last years, we had so many situations where we were able to prove back and back that a stronger ignition system is so helpful and can bring more performance, even on some cases that you're not expecting to see that. So even like a nitrous car, I mean, pro nitros really being gasoline, everyone always thought that no, ignition power is really not mandatory for nitros. You just run an air fuel that is not that rich, so it's okay. But we actually proved the opposite. We proved that you can run richer if you have strong ignition, because you won't reach misfire, which is not a good news for a nitrous engine. Then if you can run richer, you actually can just okay, you're losing horsepower because you're richer, but then you just add more nitrous. I mean, it's just like a turbo car. I mean, why would you run, let's say, 30 pounds lean if you can run 90 pounds rich and survive the engine? The nitrous is just the same deal. You just run a lot of nitrous and strong ignition. You're safer and making way more horsepower. So this is a small example.
Speaking of horsepower, something you guys have kind of baked into your product. I mean, there's so many advanced features that's in a FuelTech. Playing around with the software, I'm like, man, I don't even know what this does, but it's going to look pretty cool if I can figure it out. One of the things you guys have in there is, your own kind of brand of traction management. What have you guys put into that to make that work so well?
For definitely is track time, and definitely listen to the tuners. And I can list like 100 tuners that interact with us very often. And one good example is like Jamie Miller, Steve Petty. Those guys, they eventually they're not like engineers, they're not like high tech guys, but they know what they want. You know what I mean? So our job is actually translate their desire into electronics. So a perfect example, the last update, the 430 update we just released a couple weeks ago, we did a change on the traction control, the time-based rev limiters, which Steve Petty was trying to explain us what he didn't like, especially on the Pro Charger cars, which were so dependent on the RPM, because the boost pretty much is proportional to the RPM, engine RPM. So he wanted to RPM to be more, smoother. And we actually talking on the racetrack, on the pits, and then he gave up an idea about smoothing the RPM channel to actually use that as a reference to the traction control. And they say, man, let's try. And we tried that, and it worked flawless, and it was like amazing. And then that's a small example of how we actually work closely to the teams, and how that benefits everyone, because now that's like public available. It's not only for him, let's say this way.
So one other thing that we wanted to touch on is basically you talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to get a little more inside scoop on the way that you guys kind of approach tuning a turbo car versus a supercharged car versus a nitrous car. You talked about nitrous quite a bit. Let's talk more on the forced induction side. Like you said, you've been super busy on your hub dyno, lots of really big numbers, lots of tuning data. Talk about your tuning on the forced induction side, and then also maybe help viewers understand the difference between tuning on the dyno and tuning on the track, because from what you've said here and then from what I've seen you guys talk about in other places, like the track is where the majority of the stuff gets done, but where does the hub dyno come in when it's
okay,
pertaining to forced induction tuning?
Yeah, definitely the hub dyno is a new level on representing better the track conditions, because for the first time on a hub dyno, we can actually dyno a car above 2,000 horsepower. Second, we can recreate, let's say, the time based or the drive shaft curve, or really do let's say a 6-second pass, quarter mile pass, shift all the gears, leave on the trans brake. So it is so now closer to the actual track tuning that this is probably what advanced more lately on the dyno tuning, because it was almost impossible. I never seen a car over 2,000 horsepower in a roller dyno. It may be eventually possible, but then you can't really shift the car. You can only pick one gear, and then your tune-up is just not really right. So the hub dyno helped on that aspect, and also to dial numbers to startup. And talking about turbo cars and blower, any kind of force inductions, we've been learning so much how much fuel amount or fuel supply is a very accurate procedure of startup tuning. So right now it's if you have a precise injector, correct fuel pressure, sorry, you can clearly estimate a fuel map based on your expectations of the engine. So I'll give a small example. If you have a 1,000 horsepower naturally aspirated V8, okay, that's like a good Hemi, any kind of those. So naturally aspirated. So that actually means that you need probably fuel at 0 psi of boost for 1,000 horsepower, and there is a rule like 0.6, which means like if you divide by 0.6, you can actually have exactly what you need in fuel supply. So it'll be like 1,600, pretty much 1,666 pounds per hour of fuel. So if you want to start off that, you're very likely to be very close on that tune-up. Then let's say you say, okay, I'm going to run 30 pounds. I mean, let's say 30 pounds of boost on this engine. Every 15 pounds, you double the power. Mainly, if you keep everything in the efficiency, like the turbos and everything else. So at 15 pounds, you need double of this fuel. At 30 pounds, you need triple this fuel, and 60 pounds, you just need 5 times this fuel. So if you actually start a base map on that, and the way FuelTech maps are, like you could pretty much type the pounds per hour on the fuel map, you're very likely to do the first run and have the plugs kind of start getting some heat already, or even closer. Then you definitely tune by the plugs, because the plugs can, I mean, probably everyone who's listening to us is most of the guys learn how to tune by the plugs so many years ago, and that's still up to date. So then you actually can trim and go your engine back properly, and once you're in the ballpark, you know already the horsepower. So, and then you need to square the engine and doing that part. So that's it. And people, a lot of what we're seeing is like, you don't have to go to the tuning limit unless you're like NHRA Pro Mod, but everyone else can really run on the safer side and just run more boost. So that's been what we've been seeing on the dyno and the track and everyone.
And so a little bit more on that. Basically, when you're talking about building that base map and you have a general idea of how much power it's going to make and how much fuel that's going to consume, I'm guessing you're talking about like brake specific fuel consumption and kind of building from there. Am I right to assume that?
Yes, absolutely. And this number, like 0.6 as a factor, that takes in consideration a lot, all of that, and also kind of experience with different cars. But definitely for a turbo alcohol car, that's a typical number ends up.
I mean, I think that, sums it up right there. I learned a lot. That example you gave right there, Anderson, was perfect, and I think that'll explain a lot to our viewers, so they can get an understanding of what goes into this. I mean, I learned a lot there, Petty. What about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was really cool, and I loved how you talked about the hub dyno versus the track, because, like you said, in the past, that's something that is not always, been like, yeah, you can tune on the chassis dyno, but let's just get to the track and start there. But you didn't bust a myth, but definitely bridge the gap over what's happened in the last few years. Like, hey, the hub dyno is actually a really good start to like what we're doing. It's not so far off, and so I really like that you brought that up. So thank you so much for that. And Wagner, did you have any other questions? I'm really
actually
good.
Just one consideration: the hub dyno also been very helpful for the first shakedown of a new car or after, because man, I can tell you, we probably saved 15 race cars to be trashed, at least in the last year. With what I mean is, like, if what happened on the hub dyno and was perfectly controlled happened on the track, that would be an accident for sure. So I mean, fuel lines problem or engine problem or oil down or even like blowing up or whatever happened, but it's so much safer to shake down the car on the dyno. So even if you have, let's say, a Proline racing engine, which is the Proline tuners, they have their engine really well tuned. They really don't need to start tuning from scratch on the hub dyno, but they do for every single car, because they really want to make sure the car is working perfect. So you make sure the transmission is fine, the drive shaft is bolted, you know what I mean? And it's even stupid stuff like that. You can even see the suspension extending on the dyno. That kind of stuff, if you really can see on the dyno, it can save you a lot of track time, and not only money, but saving the cars itself.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me for sure. And it's interesting you talk about, like, watching the suspension separate, like on radial cars where it's just, really using that 4-link and the suspension. Anderson, thank you so much for being on here. Wagner, I'm good. Did you have anything else for him?
No, I mean, I suggest people do like what I do and check out FuelTech's website and their social media to learn more and check out some of those hub dyno videos. So thanks for
Thank
coming
you
on,
guys,
Anderson.
and appreciate and keep up with the good work there. We need everyone to go through this crisis and make sure we keep racing by the end of the year. Everyone is crazy to come back to the track.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, and thank you for being on the show. So everyone, that was Anderson Dick from FuelTech. What a great guest. Really lucky to have him on and his insights. And obviously, like, I learned a lot, Wagner. I know that you talked about learning quite a bit. So let's just, I guess, keep moving on. So now that we've had somebody from FuelTech, now we can move into a tuner and talk about how they use FuelTech and what their personal experiences are. And I think our next one is Jamie Miller.
Jamie Miller, the Red Hat Mafia, he's one of the godfathers of it, like I said earlier. And you'll see him as one of the gentlemen at the track, always really tuning, and he tunes every aspect of the car, but definitely, he's always on the keyboard making adjustments and whatnot. Very, very smart person that races and tunes on stuff that, just not radial tire cars, Michael Bealy's NH Area Pro Mod, a lot of different vehicles. So he has quite a bit of experience as well. So looks like Jamie's joined us. So let's roll into this interview.
Perfect segue. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Just want to start off, talk about your experience, racing a little bit, and talk about your experience with FuelTech and, what you've seen over maybe the last few years.
Okay, so basically, I've run classes from NHRA Pro Mod to RVW to X275, run some Pro Mod classes in NMCA as well. My go-to ECU platform is FuelTech. I've had some experience with other systems out there, but obviously I choose to, use FuelTech pretty much exclusively. The power management, things like that, that we've worked with Anderson and I definitely want to say that those guys are a great group of guys to work with, and the development that they make happen and in the time frame they make it happen is really impressive when you've dealt with other manufacturers and know what typical timeframes are to get new features added and things that myself, Petty, all the guys from Proline look to. We might be out there and find something. Hey, it would really be nice if the system could do this, and Anderson and his team are on that. And it's very impressive how quickly they get stuff to come to light for us and with updates and things like that.
To kind of dig into something that you said there, power management, and that's something I want to talk about with just drag racing ECUs in general, but with power management with FuelTech, kind of give our viewers an idea of what goes into maximizing, making that work properly with a FuelTech system.
So basically, what we utilize now, drive shaft sensor. We also work with engine plots where you're basically controlling the rate of acceleration on the engine, which can be done with rev limiters. It can be done with just pure timing. So let's talk for a minute on like a radial application. I'll use drive shafts to control wheel speed, but I'll also use engine curves. So you're combining both of those features and working them together, which I haven't seen systems work as well utilizing both those features at the same time. So, you'll on a radial car, for instance, like Dwayne Mills, Ken Cartuccio's cars, where it'll run a drive shaft plot, but then for some reason, if the air changes and the motor's really trying to accelerate much quicker, I've got an engine platform or a plot over the top of it that will control that as well. And it also allows us to be able to, guys will ask me all the time, hey, how do you know what the car is going to run? Because that's kind of a little thing that I do. I try to name tune-ups. We say, okay, I'm pretty certain that the car, all things being here, track conditions say the same, I think we can run X. And the car usually runs within a number or two of that. And so that's nice to be able to predict what it is, what it's going to run and how it's going to go down the racetrack.
If you could name 3 things kind of in the arena that you just talked about, because you yourself talked about it, like, hey, like I could probably name off within 2 or 3 numbers what the car is going to run, and then it'll run it. Other tuners out there do the same thing. What would be the main 3 factors, 5 factors that go into being able to dial in a car like that? Because we're talking about cars that are on the ragged edge. They're breaking records all the time. They're on drag radial tires. They have weights. They have turbo limitations, supercharged limitations, cubic inches. Talk to me about how those
They're wild animals with power adders.
Right.
Exactly.
Here's what it comes down to. You certainly have to build a database, right? Know what the converter is going to act like, what your engine plot's going to run like. So some of the things that I'll do, and myself, Petty, a lot of us do the same thing. If you're going to go out, for instance, let's talk about like trying different converters. If you have the same rear gear in, okay, you know that the drive shaft is going to be X to run. Let's just call let's just say 365, okay, on a 315 radial with a 389 gear. We know basically the drive shaft speeds that it's going to run, okay? So that being said, if we want to try a different converter, we have that drive shaft plot now. So then we can kind of move our engine plots out and figure out, okay, now this is the trend of this new converter. This is the RPM range that the engine's running in to achieve that same ET. Okay, so it gives us a huge, we can make these changes much quicker having all this data, right? And so I would say my key factors are, what I look for is in any system, and this is why I go back to the FuelTech, an engine plot is crucial for me, a drive shaft plot. And then obviously most systems have a basic, let's call it a launch retard curve, where you can put a defined timing curve in it off the release of the trans brake or a clutch switch, and it runs a generic timing retard that you've implemented into it, okay? But then these system goes beyond that, and it also does it intuitively, as far as if the engine starts to out accelerate it, we have a window that we allow it to pull X amount of timing. Okay, so that's really what makes it. So if you're at, for example, we'll say like Donald's races on radials, where you can start during the day and the DA could be, let's just call it 2,000 feet above. And then you'll get to nighttime, you're sitting there, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and the DA has just dropped down to negative 400 feet, right? So there is a huge difference in power that the engine is seeing. So if you don't have those curves to keep it in check, you can really get yourself into trouble. Now, sometimes it works out, right? Track conditions are phenomenal. It makes it, you go out and you run your fastest passes you've ever made. Okay, that's great. The other side of that is it's got so much power off the button that it rips the tire off and you have no control over it. So that's why I try to utilize all those features in the system to control it. And that's why I'm controlling the rate of acceleration, and why I'm able to predict ET numbers.
Right on. That kind of interesting how you put all that out there. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. You've tuned nitrous, blower cars, and turbo cars, right? Out of all of those, power adders across the board, all the horsepower insanity that you've got to touch, which is your favorite one?
Without a question, turbo stuff is my favorite. I'm just a diehard turbo lover. You know what I mean? I know guys are against a lot. You get a lot of hate from people on it, but I do. I really like the turbo cars. My experience with nitrous is kind of lower level, as far as I do quite a bit of 632, Outlaw 632 racing, which I've done with Ken Cartuccio, Mike, and I've myself have learned a bunch, just power management wise, with the nitrous combinations. And again, it's funny because I started off, really just focusing on the turbo stuff with FuelTech, and then transitioned into running progressive nitrous controllers through FuelTech. And the system just it works for so many different applications. it's really impressive how you can get it to work. And it's funny, like when I first started doing that stuff, I'm like, okay, all right, progressive controller. To me, that's nothing but a boost controller, right? We're just gonna ramp that in like I would ramp my boost in with control, and it actually worked out pretty slick.
And that's interesting because all the different power adders have their own kind of characteristics and how they operate. So is that something that also kind of with the FuelTech and how you tune, do you use and learn from each one,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. No question. Going back to it, like the nitro stuff, like I said, knowing that how we run, let's just call a boost ramp, I've really looked at saying, okay, well, why can't I apply power the same way, on a nitrous car? Obviously, a nitrous car, basically the power is, let's say on an Outlaw 632, 1 second, 1.2. But that same approach and how you're applying power and using, again, going back to those engine curves and drive shaft plots and things like that, utilizing those same systems that I do on a turbo car. But you just don't need, let's say, the authority on an engine plot or authority on the drive shaft plot, because the nitrous will a nitrous car, especially a 632, will respond to much less timing than, let's say, a twin turbo deal that's making over 4,000 horsepower.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate your time for sure. We've learned a lot here, and I think that you've opened up a lot of different cans of worms that we can bring you back on for sure on a lot of different stuff. But appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you once we get back out the racing this year. And we'll pick your brain some more at some point. Right?
Sounds great.
That man is so well spoken and just puts a lot out there with what he has to offer. I mean, I learned a lot there for sure, and that's a gold mine of information for our viewers as well. But the next gentleman that we have on, he's got a little bit of a reputation and some credentials too, right, Petty?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I know him best for is the fact that I believe he still has the mile per hour record for Radio versus the World. Everybody, put your hands together while you're watching this. I don't know why you do that, but just do it anyway. Mark Micke, thank you so much for being on the show, man. We really appreciate it.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, man.
So if you just want to talk a little bit about maybe your car and your experience with FuelTech and kind of the different options and the different things that you guys use FuelTech for in your car to make record-setting passes and be as competitive as possible.
Yeah. FuelTech's been really good to us. I'm trying to think. It's probably been 4 or 5 years ago. We had a different EFI on the car and we're struggling. And we just were at our wits' end. So, we got with Eric Dillard at Proline. Eric's like, look, we need to put FuelTech on here. Let's get this thing going. And we'll figure it out. We actually put the Eric LaFerrier, a friend of ours, we flew him into, I think it was Lights Out, and basically had no EFI on the car. Eric wired the car, did it all, got it ready, got it hooked up. Anderson from FuelTech came over. I'd never met the man, just walked up, said, hey, here's a tune-up, put it in the car, this will work. We put it in put it all in there. I mean, the thing started instantly, worked flawless. That weekend we set our best, we went first time in the threes, first time over 200, and, just it opened my eyes to how good a product they have and the support. And so, yeah, they've been nothing but an asset for us. They're the huge part of the whole program we have, and why we were able to set the record back when we did 362, and why we still hold the speed 221. That's just a testament to the horsepower that the motors make and what FuelTech does for us. So
absolutely. And I think I want to go back on something you said earlier about basically when you first met Anderson. You're just like, hey, like, here's your ECU, just put it in and you're good to go. And then it's like, oh, bam, there's threes. Like, that's completely bananas because I don't know of anybody else that could actually, oh yeah, like a tuner that comes up, hey, here's your ECU, just go run it. It's gonna haul ass. And it's like, oh, and you did it, and you're here and you're talking about it, and you also still have the mile per hour record. I can't emphasize that enough to anybody, because if anybody knows, 221 in mile per hour in the 8th is insanely impressive. Still the record after quite some time. And like I said, really glad to have you on the show. Glad you had that little bit of a introduction. So talk to us about the options that you guys use most in FuelTech, and also what has provided you the most insight and the basically getting over the learning curve of starting with an entirely new fuel injection system?
Yeah. When we first started with it, I was shocked. It's a really easy, simple system. I mean, and when you really break it down, the way they have the software, you know, I'm not a tuner by any means, but I can kind of fumble my way through stuff, and they just do an outstanding job. It makes sense when you click on something, and how they've got it laid out. It makes sense. Our stuff, I run our car pretty simple. I don't really use a lot of the traction control or drive shaft curves. The main reason is I just don't have time to sit there and peck on the computer because it's just me and Jason, so I'm having to maintenance the motor, maintenance the car between rounds, and don't have time to do it. You take Jamie Miller; he's the master at that. I mean, that guy can sit there and poke and move a dot here or there and gain just numbers all over. And that's the beauty that FuelTech will let you do that. Me personally, I'm a little old school, so I basically tune my stuff by timing, time-based timing curves, fuel, and I utilize our converter dumps quite a bit, which the FuelTech really gives me that option. I think in there I use a lot of my dumps on their mechanical fuel timers, which is a really good setup because you can turn them on and off multiple times during the run. It's all time based, and so that's probably the majority of my stuff. When I roll up there, we leave the boost curve. Normally, my boost curve's pretty, I guess, consistent. I don't play with the boost curve a lot. I just manipulate timing and the dumps more than anything to do my power management to the racetrack. So,
kind of going off of that again, it's interesting that you're one of the few really high level racers that will still bang on the keyboard or on your own stuff quite a bit. And one of those important parts is data makes everything go. What do what kind of stuff do you look at data logging wise? What's in your when you pop open that screen and it looks like all the crazy graphs are going everywhere.
yeah.
What are you guys looking at?
Like my number one thing I'm going to pull up is I look at engine RPM, drive shaft RPM, and G meter. That's probably my two number one things. And then I'll also, once I kind of look at that can tell me the run. If it goes out and smokes the tires or what have you, I can kind of go back and I can look at the G meter. Hey, the G meter started falling off here. Or this is where my drive shaft was. My numbers, was I just too hot before I got to that part of the track? Was G meter too high? I use that a lot. I tune our stuff off of my initial G meter reading, where it rolls the G meter. And that depending on the run that I have in it, I'll look at that. Kind of tells me how hot the car was. If it went out and made a good run, I kind of save that in the back of my mind. But if it went out and smoked the tires, I'll kind of look at the G meter before it smoked the tires, and I can say, well, I probably was trying to go too fast right there. And then just the basics. I always pull up O2 just to look at the O2s. I tune all my stuff pretty much off of EGTs and plugs. That's how I kind of go off of my stuff. And as far as the engine, to make sure the engine's happy, look at the plugs, EGTs, and that kind of tells me where I'm at on it. So yeah, mine's pretty basic, just initial when I first pull it up. So.
And so, one last question that I have for you, Mark, is basically obviously your car and your team and how you race are very top tier, right? I mean, Radio versus the World, as most people, if not everybody knows, is insanely competitive, and you've done very well at it for quite some time. If there was something that you could kind of give to other racers that might not be to that level, maybe they're a 235 car, maybe they're a 650 index bracket car that's running FuelTech, maybe they're a no time car. What are there 2 or 3 or 4 things that you could say, from your experience, that you would suggest them doing if they don't already do it, basically to kind of trickle down and be like, hey, we're up here, but a lot of stuff we do up here can translate to what street guys or no time guys or no prep guys are doing.
Right. I mean, the number one thing what I see, and I work in the industry every day, is our main focus when we go to the racetrack. my race car is ready to race. Like it's a bad day if you got to work on the race car at the racetrack. I mean, that's our goal. We don't want to work on the race car very much at the track. So we really focus on making sure you're prepared. Make sure when I unload my car, I already have a tune up. I kind of know I'm going to run the car. The car's 100%. All we got to do is put on projects, warm it up, gas it up. So preparation is what I see. Most guys, they'll show up unprepared to the track and just not ready, and they're working on the car and this and that before they make a run. That's probably the number one. Number two is just maintenance. Keep your stuff in top condition. Maintenance the hell out of it. You don't have to have the best parts or the most expensive pieces on your car, but if everything's in great shape and it's working and functioning, that's a big deal. I look at a lot of data for guys all the time, and I'll see they don't, they may just not, we don't have that, I'll say, well, what's your trans pressure? It's not working. Well, that sensor's not working. This sensor's not working. This part of the car, we just haven't fixed that yet. That's the thing, it's all the little details, get your stuff 100%. When you show up, make sure everything on that race car is 100%. Then you're setting yourself up for success. So, in my opinion,
kind of dovetailing off of that, it's interesting you saying about being prepared, because when we had Anderson on, one of the points he made with what they do at FuelTech and how they what they do is they bring people to run on that hub dyno. Is that a way that you can shake stuff down? And then is there things that you've been able to learn with the FuelTech on that? Once you're shaking things down to be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, that hub dyno is worth every penny it costs to run it, every hour you have to put into putting it on there. It's worth it. Our own experience, we put the new FT600 on last year and the coil and plug, and we took it down there. Michael Button wired the whole car for us on and on. We put it on and we just beat the hell out of it on their dyno, and we ran it. And we weren't worried about the big numbers. We got caught up in that later and tried to, just bend the needle as far as we could. And, but yeah, what I could tell you coming off that hub dyno, it showed me a lot of small details, like in the tune-up, I could make a 1 or 2% change. It would show up on the dyno, stuff you don't see on the racetrack. Learned a lot there. The biggest success on that is we came off that hub dyno, went straight to a racetrack and put a tune-up in the car off the dyno that we thought should run them, 375 to 377. The car went 377 instantly off the dyno. Everything was 100%, and we just kept pecking at it. And yeah, I mean, that dyno saved me a week at the racetrack. So,
well, Mark, I hate to cut you short, but we are out of time. I just want to, thank you again so much for being on the show, giving us your insight,
yep.
And everything that happens with your crew, and also that trickle down to maybe possibly other racers. So thank you so much for being on, and we look forward to, talking to you possibly in future episodes. So again, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right. See you.
Thanks, Mark. Really lucky to have Mark Micke come onto the show and give his insight as a driver / basically crew manager of his whole race team. Very competitive team, very good driver. He knows what he's talking about. And along with our other guests, Jamie Miller and Anderson Dick, what a great episode. A lot of big brains. Really happy to have them on. Wagner, any final thoughts on everything?
Today I learned that Mark Micke's big tip is make sure all your sensors work before you ask for help. Number one tip. But no, I mean, outside of that, people may think that this was a FuelTech commercial. It wasn't. This was about learning about what this system offers and kind of what it's all about because of how robust and what it does. And to me, there was a lot of really good information put out there about these tuners, especially the segment what Jamie put out there, and then additionally what Anderson put out there with what the company does, and then you tie it up with Mark and what you learned from a racer. It's a lot of good information here, and again, it's one of those deals where we could talk for hours with these guys, and we just got to try to boil it down the best we can.
Absolutely, I love the translation between chassis dyno or the hub dyno and the track, and basically there's a lot of other things. While we were talking about FuelTech, there were a lot of other subjects that bleed into a bunch of different areas, so that was really awesome to see. And make sure to stay tuned. We're going to be coming out with a new episode next week. We're not going to give you all the details on it, but you're not going to want to miss the next episode of Tech Inspection.